Okay, everyone. I'm assembling the first sort of complete removable, foldable V-tail for the Thermal Hunter. If this works very well, then it'll potentially be included in all the kits. So the idea here is that you'll get a stab with the laser cut slots. Into each of these slots go these plywood components, which are the hinge components that allow the whole assembly to articulate and hinge. You'll get a part that gets let into the underside of the fuselage to replace the lower aft balsa section of the fuselage. So you'd end up removing this piece here and replacing it with that piece. And so in the kit there'll be like a laser marking indicating where to cut. You'd cut that, remove that part, replace it with the plywood part, which has got the holes for the bolts that hold the stab or hold the V-tail in place. So that is part of that. And then it's got components that are in the interior portion of the aft fuselage, which help make sure that the V-tail is aligned, that it's not canted to one side, and properly supported inside. So those are all the bits. I've already cut the bevel onto the V-tails. To do that, I put tape on them to protect these fragile pieces in between the slots. So I'll leave that on for the time being. Just tap them to get any trap balsa out of there. Yeah. And I'm going to slot them a little bit as well, because you can see that the parts all have a kink in them, which means that the tape needs to allow that kink to be in the slot. So I'm just going to cut that. I'm leaving the tape on because I want to use it as a way to kind of help make sure the parts all drop in nice and flush. I could probably take it off and it won't make any difference really. Okay. Oops. All right, so I'm gonna break these guys out. They all need to be cleaned up, get their tabs off. This guy needs to come off. That one apparently, that one is pretty stubborn. There we go. They're all labeled. Sure nothing is left. Okay, good. These guys go into these slots. I guess the tape helps remind me which side is down, and they get pushed all the way to the end, like that. And I'll check these with a pin. I'll put a pin through everything before anything gets glued. Make sure that everything is properly aligned. 4 of these for this side. Okay. Should be a nice snug friction fit into the slots. One way to check that they're all flush is to put them on a flat surface and just press down. Push them all in. There we go. So those are all in. And you can see how they look. And I can get a piece of there we go. That get to push through all of them. I can check that that's nicely aligned. Yep. Okay, that's good. So that'll sit like that. I won't glue it until I have the other half all set up as well, so that I can check them and can basically look at the entire assembly and say I'm happy. So this is the other side. And the idea of all this, probably seems pretty complicated for a stab. You can do it much more simple. Obviously, you can just omit all this and just glue it in there. I do this because I like the idea of being able to transport things easily. So for example, with this, you could detach the stab, fold it in half, put it into a narrow slot in your model box, break up the wings into their components, put that in your model box, and the fuselage is just a long stick. And you could basically pack a thermal hunter away in a fairly small box, which is nice if you're a person who wants to travel to contests. Push that in. If you're building a thermal hunter, of course you can build it for fun. If you don't need to travel to contests or any of that kind of thing, then you can just build it with a fixed stabilizer. In that case, just you don't, when you're taking this out of the laser sheet, you just glue all the balsa that's in these slots, you just glue it in there, put some filler in, glue it, boom, done. Cut the bevel, glue the thing in the correct V orientation, and epoxy it to the aft fuselage, and you are done. You don't have to worry about anything else. And you can build the wings in a single piece too, and the kit comes with all the braces for that option. As a, you can do a single piece wing and a single piece fixed stabilizer assembly, and it all works just as well. Inserting the H4. These are in there actually to create braces, so when you're tightening this down, and you'll see that these little triangular pieces here actually rest against the opposing stabilizer half. And so I wanted to have some braces in there to make sure that it was strong, so that when the pressure from this side would oops, actually these are the wrong ones. They don't go here, they go on the other side. The pressure from this side rests against a series of braces that sit in this side. So it prevents it from crushing the opposing stabilizer half. Basically makes the whole thing a stable, strong assembly. So like that. So these are the braces that prevent crushing, and these are the center parts of the hinge pivot. And then on this side we have these short guys. These are just supports for the hole alignment pieces. So those guys similarly go in there. So that again can be placed against on the flat surface and just pressed in. Oops. Be a little bit careful with them, they're kind of fragile. They're fragile until it's all glued together, basically. Okay. Just gonna have to touch a little bit of glue on this guy to help keep him in one piece. Alright, so that's all set. So again, get my piece of wire out now. So you can see that you've got hinges on both, and they interlock like that. And so there has to be a little bit of just going to remove the tape here. All right. Tape kind of helps me make sure that I've got all of this done the right way, that this is the bottom and this is the top, this is bottom and top, so I don't make a silly mistake. So these guys have to interlock like this. You can see that the balsa wood bevel, the sharp edge of the bevel gets in the way just a touch, so that needs to be relieved a little bit. And all I do for that is just take a file and just take a bit of material out. Just about a 1/16. It doesn't need that much taken out. Just like that. Same thing on this side. Just so that I can do my dry fit. Okay, everything interlocks nicely. So I can run my piece of 1.2 mil wire down in there, and it should go all the way through. There we go. Piece of wire all the way through, and you can see the whole assembly hinges nicely. And when it's ready to fold, it folds up. And so you can imagine that would store very easily. Of course, the elevators would be on there as well. And then when you're ready to install the airplane, you unfold it. And these triangular braces in here keep it at the correct angle. There's some other components in here which will strengthen and reinforce all that, but right now that's that. So So that is kind of ready to be glued as is. It's working. All the parts are in and aligned. Okay, so now the next step is really simple. Just run a bead, run some thin CA across all of this. Pull it apart obviously so you don't glue the two halves together permanently. So that's that. So now I just soak some thin CA in there. And it just floods into all the joints and basically locks all that ply assembly into the stab. And it can be sanded and smoothed and cleaned up in a minute. Same thing on this side. Okay, so that's all getting glued on there. All fits nice and clean. And you can hit it with a quick sanding block. Get it all smooth. Very nice. Okay. So that's that. Now these guys need to get these little pieces, H5, have the hole in them, and so that will help guide the position of the screw, and they interlock into these. You can see there's little slots in these pieces, and so H5 interlocks into those. Everything is a little bit tight there, so a little bit of relief helps. Okay, I can clean up H5 a little bit itself. Just helps to thin it a bit. And because it's going in at an angle to the stab, the lower edge of H5 is going to run into the balsa wood. So I'm going to actually put a bevel on that. Doesn't have to be super accurate, just kind of guess. Okay, good. That should just press into place. Mine needs a little bit more. Needs a little bit more relief, I think. Just to open it up a little bit. Just want it to be a nice sliding friction fit, not too tight. Still a bit tight, I think. So I'm just going to take a little bit more off of it there. Probably just needs a little. What the difference? There we go. Hopefully that's opened it up enough to make it just drop in there. There we go. That's much better. It's dropped in there now. Just needed to be opened up. So now it's basically making contact with the balsa. These are small parts, but once they're all glued together, they will be quite strong and rigid, which is the intent. Okay, good. All right, so that's that one. And this one obviously is going to need to be opened up as well, so I'm just going to go right ahead and do that. Actually, what I might do is just use a Dremel for that. Okay. And again, I'm going to, this one's going to go in like that. You want the hole basically, because these two are the hinge ones where the pin goes through, and these two, you can't have the pin go all the way through because then the bolt won't be able to go through. It'll run into the pin. So the pin has to be just at the hinge itself. So that's why these holes are offset from the place where the hinge pin will be. So I'm just going to sand a bevel onto those now. Okay, hopefully I could probably relieve the open up these guys here. Just opening it up a hair so that that guy goes in properly. Okay. And just checking, I think it needs to be cleaned up a bit more. Good. Okay. That's pretty good. Just kind of checking that the two are same. I think this one actually needs to be thin slightly. Thin the other one out a bit, and it's there you go. Okay, so those are assembled. So you can see now that there's a place for a bolt to go through in each of these. And this links the three together to make a kind of rigid assembly. When the glue goes on that, it will help to keep the whole thing strong. And then across this side, there are these guys cut out of very thin 1/64 or half mil plywood. And these guys will go here like this. And they kind of provide a little platform against which this assembly can brace. So that brace is there on that little platform. So, okay. So I'm going to just check it all again to look like it, to check that it's the same. Okay, so hit that with some CA, lock that all together. All right, so now that's permanently in there, locked in. And I can go to the next step of assembling these guys. So I'm going to check again with my So that's going to brace like that. Okay. Oh, okay, I can see that there's a corner here. The lower edge of this creates a corner. So that needs to be carefully sanded away, or at least beveled. Use slightly rougher sandpaper. So when I flip that now, that should rest against, and that creates kind of a ridge that joins all these three together and rests against all these three. And actually, as it is, I don't think it needs the 1/64th, because it's that edge there that's resting across all of those. So it's plenty strong. There you go. There's the assembly. Folds into that neat package. And then you pull it out of your box, flip it, and then the bolts go through there, bang, bang. And of course, like, because the bolts go through there and pull it into the fuselage, that presses this whole assembly, that sort of presses this side against that side and holds it rigid. And then in the fuselage, there are these tongues here, which will be positioned so that, you know, of course, right now I've got the hinge pin through there, but those tongues in there will help make sure that it's properly aligned with the axis of the fuselage and not canted off to one side. So that's the next step. So that's that. So I can set that aside. That's the hinge assembly, which seems to have gone together very nicely, and I could probably I can discard these 1/64th parts, which is good. Fewer pieces. I like it. The next thing to do is to start assembling to substitute this piece into the aft fuselage. Now on the kits, there'll be a line on the aft fuselage to guide where to cut here to make this V. I don't have that on mine because obviously this is a prototype. So I'm going to just line this up on there, hold it nice and tight. Hopefully it all stays nicely aligned. And I'm going to just run a blade along that edge. And that will create my cut line. So hopefully you can see that. There's now a V-shaped cut line right there. On the kit, that'll just be a laser line. It'll be very lightly cut with a laser. And so if you don't want to do all this, you want just a rigid stab, you would just leave that as is and glue balsa. If you do want this removable stab, then you'll cut along that line and remove that part and bring this guy and slot him in there and glue this in. And this has all these little slots and stuff in it, which are for these internal little formers, which go into the interior of the fuselage and help align all of this. So my first task here is going to be cutting that out. And for a guy with a lot of blades, there we go. I've got so many knives in my life. Somehow on my workbench right now I don't have any lying around. So I'm just going to complete that cut. Of course, for me, I've actually already glued all this together, so it's going to be a bit of a challenge for me to get all this out of there. So we're at 35 minutes. So I'm going to call it good there. And the next video will show the assembly of all this. Thanks for watching.